Hey, welcome back. So we're going to go ahead and pretty much just get right into it. Project 2028. And this one is focused on my ideas toward a federal community reinvestment program. All right. In my view, it's really past time for America to invest in its people, invest in its citizenship, invest in its future. And I believe that America has really gotten away from that. And it never did it well in the past, but at least it was something that it thought to do, right? So we invested in education. You look at the highways, you look at the infrastructure, from sewage to airlines to security to whatever. America did make investments before, but this rush, especially over the last, I'd say 40 years to privatize everything, um, to me, it's a failed social experiment. It's time to get back into some common sense and some intentional effort to make things better for all of America's citizens and their guests, her guests, whatever. I don't know if you want to genderize it. I guess we usually say her, whatever, but America's population. So you'll see me looking around because I got notes in different places, and I'm not really good at this type of speaking, which is why I don't record very often. Okay. But yeah, Project 2028, let's get into it. So my vision for a federal community reinvestment act, not to be confused with the Community Reinvestment Act. So I'm sorry. For me, it's the Federal Community Reinvestment Program. All right, because the CRA is actually a law, and it governs, or is supposed to govern, how banking and lending institutions interact with the communities in which they reside and supposedly serve. Okay, this is different. I'm looking at America investing in the nation as a whole and really putting a boost, into getting some much needed things done. And that will range, right? So you have state projects that they may have been working on, but because states have to balance their budget and they are limited by how much money their state actually can generate versus, say, another state. And unfortunately, the more money that state can generate, the more expensive it is to do things in said state, California, for example. So the money doesn't go as far as it would in, say, another state, right? So what you could get for $1 million in California is far less than what you would get for $1 million in Kentucky. Right. But in Kentucky, they don't have the same kind of economic engines that California has. So that $1 million is much harder to come by. So that's the whole issue with the states doing things. So what I'm proposing is, from the federal level, we're going to not just push money in, because that's usually what happens. From the federal government will allocate the money, and then it'll send it to the states, and then trust it to the states to do whatever they do, because that's states' rights. And yeah, no. But nah, this time we're going to do this a little bit more old school, a little more heavy-handed. Okay, America's done the other way for long enough. It didn't work. We tested it. So let's try this one and see if it works. All right. So in this plan, the federal government would allocate the funds, right? So that involves Congress. But then we deploy teams to each state. We assign each state a team, right? So at minimum, we're talking about 52 teams, all right? One for each state, and then one for the territories, and then one for DC. Or we can do a 51 where it's all 50 states and then the territories plus DC. But we're investing in America as a whole. And those investments, we're going to start with, or not even start with, we're going to target it towards projects that, no, actually, no, we're not going to target anything. That's part of the process. So you got different teams. The teams are comprised of various specialties and talents. So you got your project management team, for example. You got your environmental team. You got your social services and social science. You got your mechanical engineering. Like these, it'd be one team comprised of all these different things, so that they can go right at the state. And where, like, I'm envisioning it flowing is we want to operate at as local as we can, right? Because when you're coming from the federal government going towards the state, you're separated, right? You're separated culturally, you're separated in many different respects. And for this plan to work, that's actually a good thing. It's good that you're not too intertwined, because we want to skip a lot of the red tape and the bureaucracy that and corruption that exists in state project management, state project assignments, right? Because right now, what can happen is, who greased the palm of that municipality's leadership in such a way to get the contracts. Right? And we don't usually see it because we focus on federal things. We don't really focus on localized things. So we don't want to just give the money to the state for the governor to just have more money to play around with and grease the palms of his donors and his friends. We don't want that. So we got to, so at the same time we're going to be doing this work, we have to interrupt the garbage that's going on, the waste, fraud, and abuse. This is where I agree with so many of our fellow people on the right. There's so much waste and abuse going on, and you need to get at it. I just don't believe that the best way to get at it is to just punish your way out of it. I think you can't just go at everything with a blunt tool. You need to actually be more surgical and intentional about what you're going for, and then build out from there. So for me, I would say let's use, because I don't know anything about it, right? So let's just say Alabama. Okay. So one team is going to be dedicated to Alabama. Now, that team is going to bypass, for everything that it does, it is not interacting with the governor, and it is not interacting with the state legislature. Not involved, which will piss them off, but I'll tell you about that in a minute. We're going to bypass those, and we're going to go to mayors, and we're going to go to the citizens. And we're going to do that by looking at things like town halls and surveys and meetings with the mayors and their staffs and different civic leaders, right? We're going to interact with all these different levels. That's what the team would do. And so they would gather ideas. They would work with the local governments to find out, well, what projects are you currently waitlisted for? What projects do you want to do, but the money just isn't there, or the whatever might be what's getting in the way. And we'll work with the government aspect to say, okay, out of those projects, how do we prioritize them? Which ones would be a good thing for us to take on as our investment project? Or maybe we just can't do those. And that would be that list. And then you also work with the civic leaders and the direct population. So that would be like your town halls, and actually having meetings with different civic groups from different communities across the state. And you find out, well, what are the things that are going well? What are the things that are going wrong? What are the things that need to be going on? And you'll probably create a prioritized list out of those. And then the team comes together and they work amongst themselves to determine what are the projects, given the budget that we have, what are the projects that we can attack, right? And ideally, it would be like, what's one that we can take off the state's plate? So what's a program they've been trying to do that we can take that on? And then what's another one would be, well, what is something that the population itself, out of its wish list, which one can we, really get at there? So let's say that this city or this town wants to make sure its roads and bridges are good, we're good to go. Costs a lot of money to do that. It takes a lot of expertise. So instead of it coming out of the state budget now, we're going to take it out of the federal money that was set aside, and that's going to be the project, right? Or one of the projects. We might do multiple projects depending upon what the size and scope of the situation is that that team is looking at. And then another one could be what we want. We want to renovate our schools, or we want to build recreational and civic centers. So our kids have something to do besides, wandering the streets and getting into trouble, right? So if that's what the community is asking for, well, instead of trying to find the money in the city and the state budget, that would be one of the projects, right? So that's what we're doing, say, in Alabama. And when we do that, like I said, it frees up the money from it going through the budget, but we're also going to have the team. The team is, like I said, multifaceted team, right? So the team is going to be interviewing different contractors. They're going to be looking into the permitting. They're going to be looking into what all really means testing and really getting into what it would take to make the project work and marshaling those resources to make it happen. And one of the cool things about that, in my view, is this would mean we're bypassing a lot of the existing structure in place that determines who gets the contract, because we don't know these people from Adam, right? So we're interviewing and looking at their work history and their portfolios, and we're deciding what's the best fit for getting this done in the time that we dictate and into the level of quality that we demand. And so the backroom dealings that used to go on between, different city officials and town officials and state officials, that's getting mostly cut out. And it'll still happen because a lot of the same contractors are in play just because of the nature of being someone big enough to do a state contract. But now you have different oversight. You don't have the oversight you're used to dealing with, right? You're not navigating the same streets. So now you got this team that was assembled at a federal level that's coming in, and you got to answer their questions. They're the ones that are auditing you. They're the ones that are watching over you. And they don't make money off of donations and kickbacks. They get a salary. And if they are caught or determined to have been taking money and favors outside of their salaries, they can be criminally prosecuted. So we can hold them accountable much easier than we can hold the contractors and everybody else accountable, right? So by bringing this team in, we're bringing in a level of accountability at the level of the decision makers. Then what that also does is it exposes things, right? The way that you were used to getting your contracts doesn't work anymore. This is a different structure that just came into play, right? You can't win the bid for 5 different state projects, but you only have one team. So now you're able to get rights to all 4 projects. The state is held hostage to how long it takes you to do these things because you only have one team that can do any one thing at one time. Now, we're not going to do that. We can hire somebody from another state to come in and do this work. We can arrange things however we need to move things around, right? And we supplement it with the Army Corps of Engineers and things like that to really push and get something done to an acceptable standard, right? Because we had so many investments, right? There's so many investments that went in the 20s, 30s, 40s, and 50s that we're living on the tail end of their reasonable life cycle now, right? Highways are breaking down, bridges are breaking down, right? Technology of 1915 is not holding up as well to the demands and the loads of 2020, right? Our vehicles are bigger, they're heavier, the environment is pushing against it differently. All these different things. It's time to build something and build some things that will carry us for the next 50 and 60 years. Okay, that's something that America has to get into the habit of, that we're constantly reinvesting in our nation so that it's constantly keeping up with what's coming, right? Not trying to push something as long as you can so you don't have to buy something else. It might work in your household. It doesn't work in the government level, right? We got our competition around the world with high speed rail and different forms of air transportation, but we don't have those things because we privatized everything. So private industry is not motivated to keep up with the times and push the envelope because it's much better. They have a captive economy, and then two, it's easier to just try to wring out every last nickel from a prior investment than to sink more into a new investment, right? Because we've gotten so far away with the privatization, we've gotten so far away from investing in America, and we're more about doing business in America. Two different things. Okay. So that's like the spirit of what I'm talking about. So once again, we're still using Alabama. So we've decided what projects and things of that nature, but we know for a fact it's going to really, really piss off governors and state legislatures because states' rights, right? You can't come to my state and tell me, no, we're not going to just come into your state. All right. The federal government is investing in you because you are a state in the union. So your ability to compete and progress is worth it to the nation, right? So Wyoming needs to rise, Alabama needs to rise, California needs to rise. Everybody needs to rise because without you, the nation doesn't rise. Okay. But here's where the state level government does come in. So they will have the right of first refusal. Okay. So before the teams are even designated and deployed, and I didn't say this before, but when the teams are deployed to their states, their first however many months, we have to figure it out. That's what the project management team's for. But let's just say the first, 6 to 9 months is really just information gathering, right? We're talking about how do we create our prioritized list, what projects we're going to take on. Let's get some actual estimates for what it's going to cost. Let's determine what resources we need to bring to bear. Where do we need to reallocate things from across the country at a federal level? All those different things. We're going to do that for the first year. Okay. You're only president for 4 years. So we want to make sure that you're really, really, really getting something out of this. And it's not one of our typical things we hear from both parties, because they both do this nonsense. The president comes in and they make a plan that's a 10-year plan. It's almost always a 10-year plan. Like at most, you only got 8 years. And the way our system works, you got anywhere from 2 to 6 years, honestly, because of the whole lame duck and congressional games and all that nonsense. So it's always a hype game. They're both lying to us. I'm saying with this Project 2028 plan and the things that are flow is no, this has to be big, right? This is foundational. Okay. So states will have rights of first refusal. And the way that would work is we lay out what the program is. Once again, we have not decided on projects. This is the program. Project 2028 will be something that whatever the candidate is, whichever party it is, that candidate has already put forth what it is. The party has already put forth what their 2028 plan is. So it's being debated and all the talking heads and all the other things that'll go on. So it won't be like brand new to anyone. But the governors and their state legislatures, however they decide to make this happen, they can do it unilaterally. They can do a ballot initiative. They can have a separate vote. I don't care. Okay. Because it's outside of the authority that I could presuppose here. But before anything is planned, right? So you got to opt in or opt out up front, right? None of this garbage, which both parties do, one more so than the other, of voting against something and then lining up at the ribbon cutting ceremony. Nah, you're in or you're out. Okay. So let's say that the governor of Alabama, along with their legislature, decides, no, I don't want to do that. We don't want, because the odds are this will be a Democratic president or administration based on how our politics work. So I don't want that. Right? Just like they did with the Medicaid expansion. I don't want that. Forget that. And I don't remember if Alabama did it per se, but you know what I mean, as far as the South in some of the different states. So they opt out. Okay. So there won't be a team going to Alabama. Okay. And so we would now be down, however, whatever that takes us down to 50 teams, 51 teams, right? Something like that. And that's it. They can't opt back in. Done. So that money that could have been pushed towards Alabama simply won't be. It'll be redeployed and spread out to other states. And they can deal with, and the state of Alabama can deal with its own constituents when they begin to see new schools being built, new roads being built, bridges being redesigned and redeployed, and all these people going to work, because this is at the heart of it is a jobs program, right? So we're hiring these teams, right? So we're staffing these teams. Each team, I mean, it could be 150, 200 plus people in a team. So that's some jobs, right? But those are federal jobs, right? And then there's the contractors who are going to be doing the work and doing the planning and doing the engineering and doing all these different things. Those are more jobs. And then this is going to take many, many years to actually fulfill. So now you have vocational schools that'll need to start hiring retired professional tradesmen and things like that. So more jobs. So we got educators coming into this, getting hired. We have the skilled labor getting hired. We have the professional labor being hired. We got all these different jobs will be generated within your state, funded by the federal government. So it's not coming out of your budget. So that's just money coming into you, not to mention the money that just comes in because we have to get the work done. Right? So states benefit from the influx of support and money. And the scope of these projects are checkpointed, right? So we're going to have short-term and midterm, and we're going to have more of a long-term. So short-term is going to be, all right, we have to make sure the short-term ones are done within one term. They have to be completed within, 3 years. From beginning to end, within 3 years, they have to be completed. Then midterm would be more like, okay, it has to be completed within 6 to 7 years, because if the administration wins their election down the line, then at least you would still have something to hold you tight during their term. And then we could have the 10 or 12 year ones that run longer, or even longer than that, depending upon what the investment is, right? Because what if we're building nuclear reactors? What if we're building high-speed rail, which I'm about to touch on? Those can run many, many years, right? But these are jobs that run many, many years and will bring economic windfalls to the states and the nation as a whole. So this is awesome. It's all about infrastructure and longevity. Now, that's it's gonna make states mad, like state governors mad, because they have power trips that we even have this. But the ones who see the promise are going to be like, yeah, let's go. I want the money. Let's go. Right? Even if we don't get to decide where the money's going, because we're bypassing them on that part, this is all benefiting their state. And guess what governors get to do? Any win that happens in their state, they get to claim. Okay. And then the mayors and the local municipalities, any win that's happening in their area, they get to claim. It's a win-win. Okay. You get the money without consequence, and you get the wins. Right. So as I say, so let's if they opt in. If they opt out, then it doesn't matter. We ain't hearing from nowhere. They can have whatever protests and throw whatever fits they want to throw. Another downside, though, or situation is Congress. It all hinges on Congress because they control the money. So the importance of this being part of and I guess I'm just going to have to just go with the Democratic Party for this, just because I don't see the Republicans ever championing something like this, right? Because in this case, I don't care if you're a red state, blue state, purple state. It doesn't matter because we're investing in America. Okay. But from what I've seen of the Republican Party, that won't fly because there's so much animosity about who's liberal and who's not, who's conservative and who's not, who's this color and this and who's not, who's this income level, who's not, who, they want to means test everything. Democrats do it too, but in a different way. But the Democrats, at least, I think, would be more inclined to push this, or maybe a third party would be more inclined to push something like this, because they're more geared towards pushing for social change that benefits people beyond their individual group. So Congress would be a bit of an issue, but do this right, then at the time that the new administration would be coming on board, voters would be voting in the type of Congress they'll need to get it passed. It literally would be part of their litmus test. Do you support this aspect of 2028? Yes or no. If you don't, then I'm not voting for you. I don't care what party you are, because my family needs a job. My family needs money to come into this area, right? So that's my fix for the Congress part. And I can go into more detail, but I'm already boring enough. I don't want to bore you further, right? I'm kind of keeping it high level. But that would be what I would say for the Congress down part. So we got the downside of the governors, the downside of Congress. Going to have like your local business community and contractors who are used to having, pick of the litter. That's going to be an issue. But we've already kind of addressed that, because these teams that are deployed, they have the power to pick and choose. So they don't have to deal with you, right? If there's only one contractor in this area that's capable of doing this particular type of work, they have the ability to call and hire another company in another country. I mean, not another country, but another state, right? It's fine. Alabama, you ain't got a lot going on. That's cool. This dude's used to robbing the state for every contract that he could put his hands on, and then only fulfilling a fraction of it. Sir, we're not going to hire you for all this. We might let you get this bid, but we're going to bring in somebody from Georgia or Tennessee, and they can come in and they can do these other things because they didn't get the contract in Georgia or Tennessee, but they were qualified. They just didn't get picked, right? So, okay, bring the team down here and work. So we can work through that as well. So that was that one. And, so let's say that the state opts in for however reason they opt in. Okay, we got the team picked, the team deploys. The first year is the whole information gathering and planning, and then we talked about short-term, mid-term, long-term. Okay, but that's at the state level. There would be a second aspect of the team, maybe the same team, right? But there's a second aspect of the team, and that team in that aspect is charged with regional projects. Okay, so we're going to overlap, we're going to cross state lines on a national level to get some things done. So we got South Carolina, Tennessee, Alabama, and Georgia, right? Sitting right there in that little thing. All right, so let's say out of all of those that South Carolina says, I don't want to play ball. I don't have nothing to do with you guys. Okay, so then the other states, the teams would have to get together and say, okay, well, what can we work on together that'll benefit our region? Now, that could be we're going to set up new rail lines. Now, I have a different plan for that, because I think we need to privatize the rail lines. The companies can be, not privatize. We need to take the rail lines and nationalize them. The companies, they can be private, but they need to pay the government. They need to pay the U.S. government for using those rails. And if they don't want to, if they want to play games and be like, well, then we're just going to run less trains, or we're going to do this or do that. Okay, we're going to revoke your ability to use our rails, and we'll let another company come in and do it, and then they can run on. And we'll set up new rail lines for like high speed rail versus commuter rail versus freight rail, right? We can do these different things. That's a different aspect of this. Maybe I'll hit on that in this video. I don't know, because it's a slight pivot. But yeah, what can we do on a regional level to make the Southeast better, right? What can we do to make the Northeast better, right? That might be that some of the longer term projects like the nuclear power plants and solar farms and a massive jobs program like the South, let's say the Southeast decides what we're going to focus on, what we're going to specialize in is, I don't know, car building. I don't know. But that's what you want to start. You want to specialize in. We're going to be the American hub for auto manufacturing. Okay. So now we have a regional plan where the teams are working together and they're pulling resources from the federal government, and they build a whole lot of state-of-the-art, top-notch infrastructure for auto manufacturing. Now we can lease those facilities to the companies to come and operate in them. Companies don't own the facilities, so we'll be, which will take some of the load off of them, and they can retrofit it to whatever they want it to, just like you do any other property. But now we're leasing the space out. We're responsible for building things up to spec and code, and really encouraging them to decide to want to come to us. Right, same thing that the states do now for sports stadiums and all the other nonsense. So same general idea, but now we're working cooperatively, right? Or you have like Silicon Valley does out in California, but now it wouldn't just be California; it'd be California and Washington. That region right there. They focus on whatever it is that they do great up there. Turbine energy. I don't know, right? But the teams will work together on a regional program there. So now we're investing local communities. We're investing state projects, right? And we're investing in a regional plan. And if you throw all those together, you have taken care of a national plan. You have raised a lot of people's standards of living. So now, I'm going to do the pivot I was talking about. All right. So that right there, that's my federal reinvestment program. Okay. Just piggybacking off of that, just because it's something that I've long thought about and I think would be pretty cool, is what we kind of call like flyover country. Don't get me wrong, a lot of you guys, we know what you did. We know what you did. But you're Americans, and your success is our success. Okay? So after all this nonsense settles, we still want to win, right? We want this country to win. Forget the party. So we have so many communities across the Midwest and the South, specifically the South and the Midwest, that prior to the advancement of highway infrastructure, they relied a lot on rail business. And I know we're talking, that's like the 30s and 40s now, but as the highways took over, a lot of these communities were completely abandoned and left to rot, right? So we have to invest in them. So this might be part of the regional project I was talking about or what have you, but it's definitely something I think we need to look at. We have some rail lines that are already there doing freight, right? But the thing about freight rail is it doesn't stop. No one's getting off the trains to go shop in local communities. No one's getting off the train to go home at night, right? That's not happening, right? There's no hotels catering to the freight rail line, okay? So why don't we look at investing in these communities and putting high-speed rail lines that can be in the same general area? They're usually in remote areas, just like the freight, so we can do it. Beautiful landscape and everything like that. But instead of them having to share the rails with freight, which is what happens right now, so that freight gets the priority, no one wants to ride a train. Because one, it takes forever, like a commuter train, because it takes forever. Their trains are overwhelmingly old, and there's nothing to do along the way. Like the train doesn't stop for the most part. It stops in a little bitty spot. I mean, certain spots. But if we can get high speed rail back, I mean, not back, but get it now in those communities along that rail line, you will be able to have hotels and shopping centers and uh, residential areas, all the different things that used to thrive off of commuter and passenger rail. We can bring a lot of that energy back using the technology of the future, not trying to go back using the technology of the past. Right. So that's how you start to invest back into our communities and put money back. So now you don't have to, raise your kids knowing that they're going to leave as soon as they turn 18, or the only opportunity they have is to leave and join the military. Right. They can actually have a job near home. There's an entire community and economic center near home. Right. Because with that, you're going to have manufacturing. You're going to everything you would have anywhere else that is highway connected, you would have in these areas that are modern rail connected. I don't see why we can't do that, other than some of the social reasons why we won't do it. But that's not the same as why we can't do it, right? So that's one thing I would definitely want to see. If I'm driving any part of this proverbial train with this project, I would be advocating for things like that, and like broadband, all the infrastructure that has to go into doing it. That's jobs, right? Everybody wins. Everybody wins. And most of all, America wins, because there's undiscovered talent all across this nation that never gets a chance to shine, because all the focus is on coastal cities and major cities. So that creates a lot of resentment in other communities that can be dispelled by opportunity. Give people more opportunity. That gives them the ability to travel. That gives them the ability to dream. It gives them the opportunity to interact with other people. That they, as business, anyone who's been in different types of business, that if you're really successful, you're going to have to interact with other countries and other people all around this world just to get your business done. That expands horizons and expands mentalities, and it gets rid of, bigoted or outmoded belief systems far more effectively than scolding people and blaming people for not being better. No, help people be better and they'll be better, as opposed to punishing people for not knowing what they simply don't know, or believing what has helped them to cope with the situation that they're in. Right? Some people, they think they need the anger and the resentment in order to fuel why it is I stay here and do these things, right? Right. I'm holding on to tradition, right? But really, they would naturally let go of some of the more negative aspects of tradition and hold to their stronger points of tradition if they could reasonably provide for their family and their community. America has failed people across this country, right? Not to get too much of my soapbox, because there's other videos for that, but like, we shouldn't have homeless people right outside of vacant buildings. Come on, guys. Right? I got, like, pivot into that one, right? Because I mean, hey, I'm taking up the time, whatever. Hopefully you're still watching. I don't know. But like, we could buy up the federal government or the state government. Federal government can give the money to the state government for this particular purpose. I don't care. But purchase some of these dying malls. You don't have to turn it into a crater in the middle of a neighborhood and let it turn into a crime-ridden trap. No, go in there and renovate them, turn them into working communities, right? In some cases, second chance communities, where, formerly homeless people, well, now they're not homeless anymore because we have housing, and they got job training in the mall, and they got jobs in the mall, and and they can go anywhere to work just like anybody else does. But we got resources right here. We got daycares in the mall, right? We're not shopping anymore. You're living, right? We got apartments. Turn all these stores and things into apartments and small communities. Now it's not an eyesore anymore. It's actually a community, just like we're seeing. Was it work to live communities pop up all over the place? Let's do that with some of these malls. You don't even have to like demolition all these things. Some of them you do because they're in bad shape. But I'm just saying, these are things that America should invest in its people for. But yeah, man, I rambled a little bit, but it was all about my view and my beliefs as it relates to reinvesting in America. Right? We have to decide, what do we want out of this nation, and what will it take to get there? Now, hopefully you'll continue to ride with me through this journey. I got far more videos to come. But this is the first one I decided to kind of drop as far as like getting at a program. Got thoughts, you got opinions, drop them, hit me up with them. Just thinking out loud.